Sudden.
JPEGMAFIA is probably going to end up being one of the most influential rappers of the 2020s. From the multiple albums he's dropped to critical acclaim, to the amount of wild things he's said about other artists, it is clear to see the amount of influence JPEG has had over the last 6 to 7 years. This is a guide to JPEGMAFIA.
Get better!
First of all, who is JPEGMAFIA? Barrington Devon Hendricks, otherwise known as JPEGMAFIA, or Peggy, which is a crazy nickname by the way, is a rapper based in Los Angeles, originally in Baltimore, who experiments with different types of sampling and production style. What are these sampling and production styles? You'll find out, just wait a bit. JPEGMAFIA's signature production style changes from record to record, but usually consists of pop samples with a lot of old school inspired drums laid on top with very weird samples, you know, kind of just mixed in there. This style was kind of cultivated by him in 2018, and you basically hear it in all of his music from there on. Most people know Peggy served a tour in Iraq for the United States military, and he very much dislikes the military. That's like a big thing about Peggy. He does not like the military. He says it was some of the worst years of his life. He did spend time in Japan, Kuwait, Germany, and during his military stays in these locations, he would spend his time making beats. This is how his first few EPs were released. They weren't released under the name JPEGMAFIA though. He released it under his own name, Devon Hendricks. In 2009, Peggy released Generation Y and Dreamcast Summer Songs to meh success. While they didn't really pop off, they did give JPEG a little bit of online presence on sites like Bandcamp. So he was kind of presenting his own music to people in the underground scene. During his military travel, Peggy would begin to get a taste of popular reception from people online. So after another mixtape, Joe Chill World, Peggy decided to start a band in Japan that would release the mixtape Ghost Pop. These 4 records are very stylistically different from the types of music JPEG would release in later parts of his career. This music that he made, these first 4 mixtapes kind of, are very, very calm, chill. Joe Chill World kind of has this weird synth wavy style of production with Devon rapping on top of that. It's actually really, really good. I think Joe Chill World is the most confident record out of the 4, but they all do stand out in their own ways. Overall, I really like these early albums that Peggy brought to the table. Generation Y and Dreamcast Summer Songs are probably the only 2 out of this 4 that are starting to show their age musically. Skipping to 2015, JPEG decided to move to Baltimore, Maryland, which had its own very popular rap scene started by rappers like Los and NOE. The Wikipedia page said Tupac for some reason. He might have rapped in Baltimore, but I'm pretty sure he's from Compton, right? What the fuck is going on with this Wikipedia article? It was in Baltimore where Peggy would start work on his next record, Black Ben Carson, which is an insult to Ben Carson, who was a conservative candidate in the 2016 election. The album's called Black Ben Carson because apparently JPEGMAFIA is on his Joe Biden shit. Black Ben Carson was his first actual album under the JPEGMAFIA moniker, and it was released on Valentine's Day too. So he's kind of like pulling a Drake kind of. Immediately, he started off this record by stating his hatred for just about any political party or ideology whatsoever. Sometimes people will say JPEGMAFIA hates white people or hates Republicans, and while that is kind of true, I think JPEGMAFIA just hates everybody. That's his whole fucking thing. He hates everybody. He will make fun of anybody. Christians, atheists, liberals, alt-left, alt-right. I think Black Ben Carson was kind of his more mid. I think Black Ben Carson's kind of mid, honestly. I didn't really like it as much of his later projects like Veteran and fucking Scaring the Host, but I think the 27 Club is good, and I also think This Shit Kid Cudi Could Have Been is also pretty good too. I really like those tracks. In 2018, JPEG released his most popular and critically praised album, Veteran, which obviously refers to his tour in Iraq and his time in the military. This record is probably one of Peggy's best works because almost all the tracks are amazingly produced with what I would like to call JPEG's signature style. Unlike his last record, Veteran features some very experimental and weird samples that tie in seamlessly with his vocals and lyrics. And all these songs go together thematically very nicely. I would say some of my favorite tracks off this album are probably Baby I'm Bleeding and Thug Tears. I also think this album has one of the strongest 5-track runs out of the 2010s in rap. Track 1 through 5 is probably the craziest first listen I've ever done. Overall, Veteran is probably the most influential album out of all the projects he's done. This album would later go on to inspire Cities Aviv for some of his projects and also inspire Gais Gruvera to make his album Black Bolvacek, which is a reference to Black Ben Carson. After the meteoric success of Veteran, Peggy would begin to work on his next big project, All My Heroes Are Cornballs, which expands on the style of sound that JPEG pioneered in his previous album. JPEG has a track off this album just called JPEG Type Beat, which is very on the nose. Quick little game for my listeners who are over the age of 21. Take a shot every single time I say JPEG. Do it, try it, actually. This album has a lot of bangers like Jesus Forgive Me, I Am a Thought, and also Free the Frail, which is my personal favorite. But in all honesty, I didn't like this project nearly as much as Veteran, or his later projects like LP or Scaring the Hose. Speaking of LP, that album was released after a 2 EP pack he released in 2020 and 2021, with his most popular song being Bald, featured on EP 1. This track was so popular that it actually made a second appearance on the LP and offline version of LP. It's kind of complicated, I don't get it. The offline version of LP was basically like a what could have been style of deluxe records, with a lot of samples being cleared as well as having more verses on certain tracks. But as for the base album, LP was probably the most JPEG sounding album that JPEG's done. A lot of the songs are really, really good. I think my favorite's probably OG. Now on to my favorite record. This one's my favorite. I really fucking love this record. I was about to make 2 videos on this shit. I loved it so much. Scaring the Hose is, in my opinion, JPEG's best work throughout his entire career. It's a common fact about this album that it was produced with an old MPC beat maker, which gave the samples and the beats in general this very fuzzy kind of tone that you hear throughout literally every single track. This is also some of the most creative and advanced production JPEG has ever done, you know, just in general. As a cherry on top, this album features Danny Brown in every single track, which I'm probably one of the biggest Danny Brown fans ever. So when I heard that this album was coming out, I literally could not hold back my excitement. I started scream crying. It was crazy. I really can't pick a favorite off this record because all of them have their own unique moments that make them special and makes the whole album special as a whole. I think, you know, the most listenable tracks are probably Lean Beef Patty and Step a Pig. His most recent album was released in 2024, I Lay Down My Life for You. It's another experimental rap record that Peggy produced. The album features a lot of metal and rock themed instrumentals on tracks like I Scream This in the Mirror and Vulgar Display of Power. This album is another really good entry into JPEG's discography, but I honestly think the deluxe version is really what ties it together. The deluxe version of I Lay Down My Life for You features a lot of really good tracks that sound like they could have been on Scaring the Hose, like Coke or Dope or Boy You Should Know. This record also comes with a second disc, which has a lot of extra stuff that would not ever make it to the OG project. I think my favorite one off that is probably What the Hip Hop Hell Is This, because of that very slowed and like weird instrumental, and also the sudden death intro. That's pretty cool. I Lay Down My Life for You is a very confident project from JPEG and a great place to end this video overall. That was a guide to JPEGMAFIA's discography. In conclusion, JPEGMAFIA's career is an example of why you should keep on pursuing and pushing to get your goal. Peggy started making beats when he was 15, but never saw any significant success until he was in his mid to late 20s, which goes to show his drive and passion for the music he makes. And if you liked this video, make sure to subscribe, because you already watched this far, you might as well just subscribe.
The archetype of a British man is a bald white man, right?